The great hall of the alien empire was silent, yet the silence carried weight heavier than sound. High above the polished black floor, glowing symbols of ancient power floated in the air, watching like silent judges. This was the Hall of Judgment, a place where the fate of worlds had been decided. Today, it was deciding the fate of one child. At the center of the hall stood the alien queen, tall and regal, her crown made of living crystal. Her face showed calm authority, but deep inside, her heart trembled. Before her stood her daughter. The child was small compared to the towering figures of the council. Her eyes glowed faintly, not with weakness, but with something unfamiliar to the aliens, uncertain emotion. She stood alone, her small hands clenched, sensing the cold rejection in the air even if she did not fully understand it. Whispers moved through the council like poison. They spoke of genetics, prophecy, and power. They spoke of flaws. No one wants her, one counselor said without emotion. She does not meet the standards of the empire. Another voice followed. She will weaken royal bloodlines. Alliance houses refuse any bond connected to her. The words struck harder than weapons. The queen did not move, but her grip tightened around the staff she held. For generations, the empire had followed one rule above all others: only strength deserved survival. Love was irrelevant. Mercy was inefficient. The law was clear: an unwanted heir had no place among the stars. The queen remembered the moment her daughter was born. The hall had been filled with celebration then, but it did not last. Scans revealed differences. Not deformities, not illness, just traits the empire could not measure or control. Traits that did not fit their idea of perfection. From that moment, the galaxy had turned its back on the child. The council projected images into the air, alliances withdrawn, military houses refusing loyalty, entire systems threatening rebellion if the child remained recognized. Each image was another reason, another excuse. The queen listened in silence. She had faced wars without fear, but this was different. This was not an enemy she could defeat with fleets. Her daughter looked up at her. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and in that moment, the queen almost broke. But queens were not allowed to show weakness. She turned her gaze back to the council, her voice steady. "What is your judgment?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. The lead counselor stepped forward. "By ancient law, the child is declared unfit. She is rejected by the empire." The word rejected echoed through the hall. A low hum filled the chamber as the law activated. Rejection meant exile or worse. The empire did not tolerate burdens. The child did not cry. She had learned already that crying changed nothing. She only lowered her head, as if accepting something she had never chosen. Far from the center of the hall, almost unnoticed, stood a group of observers from another species, humans. They had been invited as neutral witnesses, their presence considered symbolic rather than important. Most aliens barely acknowledged them. Humans were seen as emotional, fragile, and politically insignificant. One human man watched the scene closely. He did not understand every word of the alien language, but he understood enough. He saw the way the child stood alone. He saw the way the queen's stillness was not calm, but controlled pain. Most of all, he recognized something familiar, the moment when power crushed innocence. Around him, other humans remained silent, following protocol. This was not their empire. This was not their law. Interference was not expected. The council moved to finalize the judgment. Energy fields began to form, preparing to remove the child from the hall forever. The queen's gaze remained forward, but inside, her thoughts screamed. She was the ruler of thousands of systems, yet powerless to protect her own daughter. The child took a small step forward, then stopped. She looked around the hall one last time, at faces filled with indifference. No one stepped forward. No one objected. The galaxy had spoken. Except someone had not. The human man shifted his weight. His hands trembled slightly, but his eyes were steady. He knew that stepping forward could have consequences. He knew humans held little authority here. But he also knew something else. silence made him complicit. As the energy field brightened, as the final moment approached, the human took a breath. And he stepped forward. The sound of his footsteps echoed through the vast hall, drawing every eye toward him. Confusion rippled through the council. The queen turned her head, surprised. The human raised his voice, calm but firm. "Stop!" The hall froze. No one had expected a human to speak. No one had expected defiance. And in that single moment, when a rejected child stood on the edge of exile, the fate of the empire began to change. The hall remained frozen after the human voice echoed through the chamber. No one moved. No one spoke. The energy field around the child paused mid-glow as if the ancient systems themselves hesitated. The council members turned slowly toward the human delegation, their expressions shifting from surprise to irritation. A human speaking in the Hall of Judgment was unheard of. The lead counselor rose higher on his platform, his voice cold and sharp. "This hall does not recognize human authority. You will return to your place." The human did not move. He stood firm, his eyes not on the council but on the small figure near the center. The child looked at him confused, unsure why someone would risk everything for her. The alien queen felt something twist inside her. Hope. A dangerous emotion she had buried long ago. She knew the law better than anyone. The law was older than her crown, older than the empire itself. It was created during an age of chaos when weakness had nearly destroyed them. The law was simple. Anything unwanted was removed. Anything unfit was erased. Mercy had no place in survival. The queen remembered her own coronation. She had sworn to protect the empire above all else. Even above her own heart. Breaking the law meant rebellion. Rebellion meant civil war. The council activated the historical archive. Holographic records filled the air. Images of past eras removed without hesitation. Worlds stabilized after sacrifice. Empires strengthened through cruelty. The message was clear. The law worked. The lead counselor spoke again. The child has no alliances. No military value. No future contribution. Keeping her risks instability. Another counselor added. The empire does not bend for emotion. The child stood still, listening without understanding every word but understanding enough. She knew she was unwanted. She had always known. From the moment she could walk, servants avoided her gaze. Teachers spoke in distant tones. Even guards hesitated to stand near her. She was different, and difference was feared. The queen watched her daughter and felt the weight of generations pressing down. She wanted to speak. She wanted to shout. But queens did not plead. The human finally spoke again. "Your law protects power, not life." The hall reacted instantly. Security fields activated around the human delegation. Weapons charged though not yet fired. The council laughed softly. "Humans speak of life because they fear death," one counselor said. "That fear makes them weak." The human turned his gaze to the council. "No. It makes us dangerous." That word carried through the chamber. Dangerous. The council paused. Humans were known for short lives, fragile bodies, and emotional decisions. But their history was filled with impossible survival. Wars they should have lost. Allies they should have abandoned. Yet they endured. The queen remembered the reports. Human colonies rebuilt after devastation. Human fleets defending worlds not their own. Humans adopting refugees other species discarded. She had dismissed those reports as inefficiency. Now she wondered. The lead counselor addressed the queen directly. "Your Majesty, the law demands conclusion. Delay weakens authority." The queen closed her eyes for a brief moment. She saw her daughter as an infant reaching for her finger. She saw her laughing once before she learned silence. She opened her eyes. "Proceed," she said quietly. The word cut deeper than any blade. The energy field intensified again. The child felt the warmth rising around her. Fear finally surfaced in her eyes. She took a step back toward her mother. The queen did not move. But her hands trembled. The human clenched his fists. This was the moment. If he failed, the child would vanish forever. He spoke louder now, not shouting but commanding. By Interstellar Observer Rights. I challenge this judgment. The hall erupted in confusion. Counselors spoke over one another. Ancient systems struggled to process the claim. The lead counselor shouted, "Those rights are obsolete." The human replied calmly, "Only if forgotten." The energy field flickered. The queen looked sharply toward the human. For the first time in centuries, the law hesitated. And hesitation was the beginning of change. The hall slowly returned to motion, but the tension did not fade. Every council member was now aware of the human presence. What had once been ignored had become impossible to dismiss. The human stood alone at the edge of the judgment circle. He was not tall compared to the aliens. He carried no weapon, no symbol of power. Yet his presence felt heavy. The queen studied him carefully. Humans were strange to her people. They lacked natural armor. Their senses were limited. Their lifespan was short. By alien standards, they should not have survived the early space age. Yet they did. The queen remembered the first contact reports. Human ships damaged but still advancing. Human captains refusing surrender even when defeat was certain. They were reckless. But they were persistent. The council tried to regain control. The lead counselor demanded explanation. Why does a human care about an alien child? The human did not answer immediately. He looked at the child. She stood frozen, still surrounded by energy light. Her eyes were wide, not with hope but confusion. She did not understand why someone would speak for her. The human finally spoke. Because she is alone. The answer confused the council. Alone was not a strategic value. It was not a political term. It meant nothing to them. The queen felt her breath catch. She understood. The human explained that he had been watching since the beginning. He had noticed how no one stood beside the child. How every voice spoke about her but never to her. He said humans notice things like that. One counselor dismissed him. Observation does not grant authority. The human nodded. But it grants responsibility. That word caused discomfort. Responsibility was not something the Empire valued. Power decided outcomes, not conscience. The human delegation shifted uneasily. They had not expected this. Protocol demanded silence. Interference could end negotiations between species. But the human had crossed that line already. He continued speaking. He described Earth. A world where survival was never guaranteed. Where the weak were not always protected. But where humans had learned something important. Civilizations do not fall because they protect too many. They fall when they decide some lives do not matter. The council reacted with sharp tones. This is emotional rhetoric. The human accepted that. Yes. It is. Emotion built our species. It is why we defend strangers. Why we adopt children not of our blood. Why we rebuild after loss. The queen watched closely. She had ruled by logic and law. But this was different. This was something her empire had long abandoned. The child took a small step toward the human. The energy field allowed it. The systems were still confused by the challenge. She did not know why. But she felt something new. Safety. The queen noticed. Her heart tightened. The council warned the human. Interference will bring consequences. Humanity risks diplomatic isolation. The human met their gaze. Humans are used to standing alone. That sentence echoed deeply. It carried history. Wars fought without allies. Exploration without approval. Survival without permission. The queen realized something dangerous. Humans did not fear isolation. They had evolved with it. She recalled a report she once ignored. A human colony had taken in refugees from 3 rejected species. Those species later became allies. Strong ones. The council attempted to reassert dominance. They reminded the queen that allowing this would signal weakness. Other systems would question her authority. The queen did not respond. She was watching the human and her daughter. The human knelt, slowly lowering himself to the child's level. Security systems hesitated again. No threat detected. He spoke softly. You are not broken. The child stared at him. No one had ever said that. You are not unwanted. He continued. You are simply in the wrong place. The queen felt something crack inside her. The Empire had taught her to be unbreakable. The council raised their voices. Enough. The human stood. He faced the queen directly now. Not as a subject. Not as a challenger. But as an equal. He said. Humans choose family. We do not wait for permission. The hall went silent. The queen realized this was no longer about law. Or tradition. Or politics. This was about a choice. And the human had already made his. The galaxy was about to see what happened. When humanity refused to look away. The throne hall felt smaller now. Not because the walls had moved. But because the balance of power had shifted. Every eye remained fixed on the human. He stood before the queen and the council without armor, without rank, without fear. The ancient hall had seen warlords kneel and empires fall. Yet never had it seen a human stand. The lead counselor spoke with controlled anger. You have said enough. This judgment will continue. The human did not raise his voice. He did not step back. He simply said, no. The word carried weight. It was not loud. But it was absolute. Security fields surged again. Energy barriers formed between the human and the child. Weapons locked on him from every angle. The air vibrated with restrained force. The queen felt the pressure immediately. If the human was harmed, diplomacy would collapse. If she protected him, authority would fracture. For the first time in her reign, there was no clear path. The council demanded compliance. Human observer, you are violating imperial law. The human turned slowly, facing the council fully now. He spoke clearly so every system could record his words. Humans recognize interstellar observer rights. Those rights allow challenge when a sentient life is condemned without crime. The council reacted with disbelief. Those rights are ancient. They were written before your species reached the stars. The human nodded. Yes. Which means they apply to everyone. The ancient systems processed the claim. Old protocols awakened. Symbols flickered across the hall. The energy field around the child weakened again. The queen watched the systems with disbelief. These laws had not been invoked for centuries. Most species had forgotten them. Humans had not. The council panicked. They attempted to override the process. But ancient code resisted modern command. The child looked around confused. She felt the energy loosen. She felt the room breathe. The queen stepped forward. Her movement silenced the hall. She looked at the human. Then at her daughter. Then at the council. Why do humans interfere? She asked. The human answered honestly. Because no one else did. The simplicity of the answer struck the queen harder than accusation. She had interfered in wars. In trade. In planetary disputes. But not this. The council accused the human of manipulation. Of emotional warfare. Of weakness. The human accepted the accusation. Weakness is caring, he said. Strength is standing anyway. That sentence echoed through the chamber. Recorded by every archive. Broadcast unintentionally to nearby systems. The queen realized too late. This moment was already spreading. The council warned her. If you allow this challenge, other systems will question your rule. The queen replied quietly. They already do. The human took one final step forward. He stood directly beside the child. Not touching, but close enough that she was no longer alone. I claim guardianship, he said. The hall erupted. Guardianship across species lines was almost unheard of. It required responsibility, protection, and sacrifice. The council shouted objections. Humans could not protect an imperial heir. Humans were unstable, emotional, dangerous. The human did not argue. He said, then test us. The queen felt something shift within her. This was not rebellion. This was challenge. The kind her empire respected. She looked down at her daughter. The child was staring at the human. Not with fear, but with something fragile. Trust. The queen raised her hand. Silence returned. She addressed the council. The challenge is accepted. Shock rippled through the chamber. The ancient systems confirmed it. The judgment was suspended. A trial of worth would begin. The council protested. But the law had spoken. The queen turned to the human. If you fail, she said, the consequences will reach your species. The human nodded. We understand. The queen looked at her daughter one last time before the hall shifted into transition mode. For the first time, the child was not being removed. She was being defended. And across the stars, the galaxy began to realize. Humanity had not come to observe. They had come to stand. The trial of worth did not begin with weapons. It began with questions. The ancient systems shifted the throne hall into a chamber of record. Light formed vast floating panels displaying histories from countless civilizations. The council believed this would expose humanity's weakness. Instead, it revealed their mistake. The lead counselor demanded evidence. What makes humans worthy to claim guardianship of an imperial child? The human stood before the records. Calm. Focused. He did not start with victories. He did not show fleets or conquered worlds. He began with loss. He spoke of Earth's early history. Of fragile bodies facing hostile worlds. Of disasters that should have ended them. Plagues. Wars. Famine. Yet humanity endured. He showed records of humans rebuilding cities after collapse. Of returning to worlds burned by war. Of choosing cooperation when extinction was easier. The council dismissed this as sentiment. Survival alone does not earn fear. One counselor said. The human agreed. Survival does not. Choice does. The systems displayed new data. Human colonies refusing evacuation to protect allied species. Human soldiers standing between invaders and civilians not their own. Human ships remaining in battle when retreat was logical. The queen watched silently. She had seen similar reports. But never together. Never framed as a pattern. The human explained that humans were not the strongest. Not the fastest. Not the most advanced. But they were the ones who stayed. When others calculated loss. Humans calculated responsibility. The council challenged him. Emotion clouds judgment. Emotion leads to failure. The human replied. Emotion creates loyalty. The record shifted again. Species once saved by humans now thriving. Defending human worlds in return. Forming coalitions stronger than any empire. The queen felt unease. Her empire ruled through fear. Humanity built strength through connection. The council accused humans of manipulation. Of using compassion as a weapon. The human nodded. It is a weapon. One you cannot predict. That answer unsettled them. The child stood near the queen watching the projections. She saw humans shielding smaller beings. Humans holding the hands of frightened aliens. Humans choosing to stand where no one else would. She did not fully understand. But she felt something awaken. Belonging. The council demanded proof of capability. Compassion alone does not protect. They said. The human addressed that directly. Humans protect because they must. Failure means living with it. He explained that humans fear something worse than death. Abandonment. That word rippled through the hall. The queen realized something. Her empire feared weakness. Humans feared becoming monsters. The records revealed final data. Human laws. Strict rules protecting children. Even those without blood ties. Even those rejected by society. The council grew silent. They had no equivalent law. The lead counselor spoke carefully now. If humans are so protective, why are they feared? The human met his gaze. Because once we choose someone, we do not stop. Threaten them. We respond. Hurt them. We retaliate. Erase them. We remember. The hall absorbed that truth. The queen felt a chill. Not of fear, but understanding. Humanity was dangerous not because of power, but because of commitment. The child looked up at her mother. For the first time, she smiled. The queen felt tears threaten, but she remained composed. The council attempted one final objection. What happens if the child fails? If she truly is unfit? The human answered without hesitation. Then we will stand with her anyway. The ancient systems recorded that statement, binding it to the trial. The queen realized this was no longer about her daughter alone. It was about the future of governance. An empire built on rejection versus a species built on choice. The trial chamber dimmed. The evaluation phase ended. The queen rose. She looked at the council, then at the human, then at her daughter. The galaxy now waited, because the next decision would not just decide a child's fate. It would decide what kind of power would rule the stars. The throne hall entered a deep stillness. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of waiting. All eyes turned to the alien queen. For the first time, the council did not speak. The ancient systems had finished their evaluation. The law had paused, and only the ruler could move it forward. The queen stood from her throne slowly. Each step she took echoed through the chamber. She felt the weight of every world under her rule, every tradition, every expectation. She looked at her daughter. The child stood closer to the human now. Not hiding, not shrinking, standing. That sight alone challenged centuries of belief. The council sensed danger. They spoke quickly, warning her of consequences, of unrest, of fractured loyalty, of rebellion. They reminded her that empires survived through certainty, not compassion. The queen listened, then raised her hand. Silence returned. She spoke not as a mother, but as a ruler. For generations, we believed rejection made us strong. She turned to the council. But strength that fears difference is fragile. Murmurs spread through the chamber. No ruler had ever questioned the law this openly. The queen continued. This child has committed no crime. Her only failure is not fitting our design. She turned toward the ancient systems. And that is not failure. The council reacted sharply. They demanded enforcement. They warned of collapse. The queen did not look at them. She looked at the human. You understand what guardianship means, she said. The human nodded. It means protection, sacrifice, and standing alone if necessary. The queen studied his face. She searched for doubt, for ambition, for deception. She found none. She asked one final question. If the empire turns against her, will you still stand? The human answered immediately. Yes. The simplicity of the response shook the hall. The queen turned back to the council. Then the empire will adapt. Shock spread like fire. She declared her ruling. The child remains under human guardianship, protected by imperial decree. The ancient systems responded instantly, recording the decision, binding it to law. Alarms sounded across distant systems. Notifications spread. The galaxy reacted. Some worlds celebrated. Others panicked. The council erupted in outrage. Several members withdrew their loyalty. Others threatened secession. The queen remained unmoved. She had already crossed the line. Security reports flooded in. Border systems destabilizing. Military commanders requesting guidance. The queen issued a single command. Hold. Her empire had been built on fear. Now it would be tested by change. The child stepped closer to the queen. Hesitant. Mother. The word was soft. Uncertain. The queen knelt before her. An act unseen by any council. You are not a mistake, she said. The child trembled. The human watched quietly, understanding the moment. The queen rose again, facing the hall. Let this be known, she declared. Any who harm this child harm the throne. That statement carried absolute authority. Across the empire, rebels paused. Enemies reconsidered. Humans were not the only ones listening. Other species watched closely. Those once rejected, once silenced. Hope spread quietly. The human delegation received emergency signals, warnings, threats, requests. Human leadership debated intervention, withdrawal, preparation. But the human in the hall had already chosen. He placed himself slightly between the child and the council. Not as a guard, but as a promise. The queen noticed. She addressed him once more. This path will cost you, the human replied. It already has. And we still choose it. The queen felt something she had not felt in decades. Relief. The hall began to clear. Council members departing to deal with the consequences. The empire had entered a new era. As the doors closed, the child looked up at the human. Why? She asked quietly. The human knelt again. Because no one should face the universe alone. The queen turned away briefly, composing herself. Outside the throne hall, the stars burned unchanged. But within the empire, everything had shifted. Tradition had been challenged, fear confronted, and a single choice had shaken power itself. The galaxy now understood. Humanity did not conquer with fleets. They conquered with resolve. And this was not the end. It was the beginning. Time did not slow after the ruling. It moved faster. The empire entered an age of adjustment. Some systems resisted. Some adapted. Some watched carefully, waiting for failure. The child grew. She no longer stood at the edge of rooms. She stood within them. Human guardians became a constant presence in her life. Not as rulers, but as guides. They taught her language. Not just words, but meaning. They taught her history. Not just victories, but mistakes. She learned that humanity was not perfect. They failed. They argued. They lost. Yet they returned. Again and again. The queen watched her daughter change. The fear faded. Curiosity replaced it. The empire began to notice. The child showed empathy in councils. She listened before speaking. She questioned decisions. She asked who would be harmed. Such questions unsettled old leaders. Some dismissed her. Others saw strength. Reforms followed quietly. Laws were reviewed. Exile became rare. Rejection required reason. The empire did not weaken. It stabilized. Allies once distant approached. Species once fearful spoke openly. Humanity gained reputation. Not as conquerors, but as anchors. When conflicts arose, humans were requested. Not for firepower, but for mediation. The child trained alongside humans. She learned defense, strategy, and restraint. She learned that strength did not always mean force. Years passed. The child became a symbol. Not of rebellion, but of evolution. The queen aged. Her rule softened. Her authority remained. She had chosen a path no ruler before her had dared. History recorded her reign differently. Not as the strongest, but as the bravest. The human who first stepped forward remained. Not as a hero, but as family. The child called him guardian. Not by law, but by choice. The galaxy watched as she took her place among leaders. Not feared, but respected. Those once rejected found new voice, new worth. Humanity never claimed ownership, never demanded reward. They stayed. That was enough. When future councils debated law, they remembered the day the hall fell silent. When a human spoke one word, stop, they remembered hesitation. And what followed? The empire no longer erased difference. It studied it. Across the stars, stories spread. Humans do not abandon the unwanted. The phrase became truth. The Queen stood once more in the throne hall. Now older. Now wiser. She looked at her daughter seated beside her. Confident. Calm. She realized the Empire had not lost control. It had gained direction. As the stars continued their endless burn, the galaxy adjusted to a new constant. Humanity would stand. Not above. Not below. But beside. And in doing so, they changed everything.